Now, obviously, as you've heard, the Public Enterprises Minister Pravin Gordhan saying he's informed the Eskom Annual General Meeting of his decision to appoint Jabu Mabuza as Interim Executive Chairman and Acting CEO of Eskom Holdings. His appointment follows the resignation of Phakamani Hadebe at the end of this month. Mabuza will serve for 3 months, during which the time the Eskom board will identify a suitable candidate to become the next Eskom GCEO. Ted Bloom, energy analyst, joins us now on the line. A very good evening to you, Ted, and thank you so much for speaking to us. Let's just first start with that shareholder compact. Some say that it may create a conflict of interest to have a chairman of the board as acting CEO, given the fact that he has to behave in two different and separate ways with regards to those two positions.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's an abnormal situation. A normal situation would have been where the board had appointed an interim or acting CEO from amongst themselves. So the fact that the chairman, who is really, if I can give you an example, is really in the role of a choir master, orchestrating the board in directions, for him to actually take over as an executive position as CEO, is actually quite strange. More so because of Mr. Mabuza's own testimony in front of the Zondo Commission, where he admitted to very severe conflicts of interest.
So what do you think is likely to happen? If you're saying that you're seeking stability here and you appoint the chairman into this position, what exactly are you after? Are you able to stabilize? Pointing at the fact that you're already saying there needs to be a separation of those two roles, and given the past admissions of Jabu Mabuza that this might present a difficulty, especially when it comes to conflict of interest.
Yeah, I can't understand what rationale prevailed when Minister Gordhan made this appointment or announcement. It's also unusual for the shareholder to elect somebody to that. Normally the board makes that decision. They have a discussion, and then amongst themselves they select somebody to lead them. So this has got two anomalies, which I guess tomorrow we'll hear when it's at Eskom's results presentation.
Is it a case of a track record? There are those who suggest in big corporates where the share or the CEO becomes a shareholder because of that track record and they want to keep it going. Could a case be made in this case?
Well, I don't know what track record we're talking about, because the new board was appointed on the 19th of January, or more or less at that time, and they were supposed to deliver a proper business turnaround plan by September last year, after 9 months, which is an exceptionally long time for an organization that is critically ill. It's now 18 months and we're still awaiting the turnaround plan. So I'm not quite sure how the acting chairman is actually going to steer the ship forward, because the very person that they're going to appoint within 3 months, it seems to me, is going to have to be the person who inherits whatever happens in the next 3 months in terms of creating stability and steering the ship out of the troubled waters. And that is a very unusual situation, because normally the person that you would appoint would be somebody with the ability, firstly, a person who understands the sector, the electrical supply industry. Secondly, understands Eskom very well. Otherwise, it's a waste of time. It'll take us back another 18 months. And thirdly, somebody who has got a vision as to where Eskom needs to go in its turnaround. Because you can't just turn around and turn around and turn around. You've got to have a direction and a vision as to where this organization needs to be positioned within 6 months, within 12 months, within 18 months, and hopefully the turnaround doesn't take longer than 3 years. And then you need to be able to sell that to your creditors. And then if they believe you and they believe that you have the capacity, they will open up the taps and give you more funding. But if they don't believe you, the funds will remain shut behind locked doors.
So I want to talk about those challenges that Eskom is facing. As a going concern, there are those who've argued that the problem is probably political interference, and we've seen often in press conferences, very important ones, you've seen Jabu Mabuza there, and the Public Enterprises Minister does that. Perhaps suggest synergy between the two, the thinking about the strategy going forward, and also what is needed. There are those that say a numbers man is needed because of those financial woes, but others who say somebody who's more stronger in operations. Where does Jabu Mabuza fall within this?
Well, Mr. Mabuza doesn't have sector experience, other than the fact that he's conflicted with his supply of very expensive coal to Eskom, and also supplies of engineering services to do up maintenance at Eskom, and thirdly, his interest in the control instruments industry. But other than that, I mean, he doesn't have actual Eskom experience, so I wouldn't call him an operations specialist as far as generating electricity is concerned. And I don't think, for the love of me, that he's quite the financial whiz-kid that would be required as well, because, and that's where Phakamani, with respect, was supposed to play a major role, having come from the banking sector and having close ties to that sector. It was probably hoped that he would be able to tick all the boxes and open up the taps. But the fact of the matter is, as Mr. Hadebe himself has acknowledged publicly, is that when he picked up the phone to his former colleagues, they all said, well, welcome to Eskom. Congratulations on your appointment, but the taps stay closed until you deliver a turnaround plan. And as I said, 18 months later, and there's still no turnaround plan. If I can just compare, Eskom is the biggest company on this continent. If this company was operating in any other proper first world jurisdiction, for instance, United States or United Kingdom or Europe, I promise you that the board would have been given 30 days, maybe maximum 60 days to deliver a turnaround plan, stop the hemorrhaging, or else they would have been booted out.
So just looking at the structure of Eskom, in the past it's been run by the CEO, the COO and the CFO. There's now obviously the suggestion by Treasury of a CRO, which some say begs the question whether or not the position of CEO is not redundant. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think this is a big problem with the introduction of the CRO. Because to me, it's analogous to the government admitting that Eskom is in business rescue. Because the roles that have been identified so far, and they're not clear, by the way, is that of what a business rescue office would normally contemplate. But if I may say, if the CRO was called the Corruption Recovery Officer, I would be the first one to ring the bells and sing hallelujah. Because that's what Eskom needs. It needs somebody to stop the corruption. It's 18 months later, and the corruption is still even on the same level as 18 months ago. But I would bet, and a lot of people would agree with me, it's even worse than it was 18 months ago.
So what would then the CRO be doing in the greater future plan of the structure or any other future business model? Would they be affecting what Treasury actually wants? Well, what role would the CEO be playing if we're just to imagine all of these four rows interacting?
Well, that's where you've got a problem of overlap of duties, because initially when the Minister of CRO, he seemed to indicate that that person was going to be the custodian of the additional funds that are going to be made available to Eskom. But I mean, that's a tantamount to saying that you've got no confidence in the current CFO, because that essentially is the job of the CFO, is the custodian of shareholder funds. So I'm as baffled as you are as to what the CRO is actually going to be doing, other than it's going to cost us a lot of money.
So let's look at the possible candidates for CEO, as the Public Enterprises Ministry is saying that it's open for applications. They'll have to vet those applicants. Who would stand out as possibly being somebody who could take over this huge challenge of a job? Is there anybody that sticks or comes to mind that you think would do well in this position?
Okay, so with respect, I'm not at liberty to drop names, and that's also not my style. But I would strongly urge that whoever takes over as a CEO needs to have a very solid, and I mean solid, understanding of engineering and engineering principles and boilers and metallurgy and geology. If that person doesn't have that, there is no chance that he will ever get to grips with what goes on within Eskom or ever get the respect from the operating divisions. Within Eskom, as much as a lot of people think they do a very important job at Eskom, the core division is generation. And if it's not somebody with a strong generation background, either formally or via experience or via insights, and I would urge even somebody who comes from Eskom, who's got Eskom cultural experiences and values experiences, which Mr. Hadebe had indicated in his first interview, that is what he was going to focus on. If you don't have somebody who's steeped in generating electricity and generating as much of it and as cheaply as possible, I think it will take Eskom backwards. To bring in novices and somebody who can't handle the political pressure or the culture of Eskom, he won't last. He will not bring the ship home.
So some say at Eskom it's a people-driven business, so you'd have to get the support and buy-in of the people at Eskom, the staff. So what would work? Somebody who's perhaps been a former DG at the Department of Energy, an electrical engineer, somebody who has been a nurse, who has vast experience there. What would work? Maybe a former CFO at Eskom.
Okay, so I would say that somebody that has a strong engineering understanding or background, preferably I would think a mechanical engineer or else a combustion engineer, because that is what Eskom does. It turns coal into electricity. And it's very simple. It's been doing it for more than 100 years. But somehow it's lost track of its corporate memory and its institutional practices. So that's why I'm urging that somebody, as an interim measure for 5 years, so that bring back somebody who actually has had hands-on Eskom experience. I mean, that would make life so much easier for that person because he would know a lot of the faces, he would remember what the organization was capable of, and try and have a benchmark as to where it needs to be restored to. If you bring anybody else in, I mean, we saw this with the new board. They were brought in. Somebody made them believe that their best bet was to cut the budget. The first thing they did is they cut the technical budget, and immediately Eskom had maintenance issues and blackouts and boiler failures and so on. So really, I think we as South Africans are tired of being guinea pigs, and we need somebody that fits the muster. To be appointed and not on political lines.
And that's the last point that I wanted to raise. So from a tactile perspective, how would this person have to deal with? Treasury is obviously trying to, or is asserting itself, saying that there will be no bailouts until certain conditions are met. So how would this person be, navigating this political game? Okay,
so I mean, I think part and parcel of the negotiations of taking on this role would need to be some sort of guarantee that operationally there would be no interference with the organization. And I think that was the death knell of Mr. Hadebe, is that on his first major decision that he made, and that was in respect of the salary increases, within days he was overruled by the ministry, and he was made to look like a fool. And I really think that that is not a fun position to be in. So whoever takes the lead, you would need to have some categorical political undertakings that if there's any political interference, he gets paid out the full contract, because it's not tolerable to try and run an organization. It's like having children in the house. You can't want to have the father discipline the child, and then the child runs to the mother who then turns the other cheek. I mean, it's an organization that needs to be run on a respect basis. I have tremendous respect for the unions, and I have sympathy for their position as well, because they have not been treated with respect and dignity so far in the way that the new board has taken place.
Ted Bloom.
And I've had the undertaking that if it's a sensible thing and they are consulted, they understand that certain drastic issues need to be tabled at Eskom. They understand that very clearly. But they're asking that at the same time, as much as you cut on the one hand, we create major opportunities on the other. And that can be done by somebody who has a proper vision of what Eskom can produce for the South African economy.
Energy analyst Ted Bloom, thank you very much. Let's leave it there. Stephen?